Welcome to Crime Stoppers. I'm your host, Chip Brown. Heartland Crime Stoppers is a community-based program designed to help law enforcement solve crime by providing a way for the public to phone in tips anonymously and receive cash rewards of up to $3,000 for information that leads to an arrest, the recovery of stolen property, or the recovery of illegal drugs. Heartland Crime Stoppers is funded through the State of Florida Office of the Attorney General Crime Stoppers Trust Fund and through donations from the community. Citizens and local businesses make Crime Stoppers work. On today's show, we will talk with Michele Newsome, who serves as the director of the Porch Light. But we first start off with our show with Kim Lawrance, the mother of a 17-year-old who was recently sentenced to 10 years in an adult prison, followed by 10 years of probation. She is the youngest female in the women's prison right now. Kim is here to talk to us about the effect it has on the family. Kim, welcome to Crime Stoppers.
Hi, thank you.
Now, you're originally from South Florida. Tell us how you kind of ended up here in Polk County.
Well, 3 years ago, I moved to Polk County following my job back in 2014. And about 2015 is when things changed.
Yeah. Now, you had an interest before that time about doing CPR, some volunteer work, in the prison. But that, like you say, changed pretty quickly, didn't it?
Yes, I was going to volunteer to do CPR. It was offered during the day only, so I worked during the day, so I didn't get the opportunity. So I had already been cleared.
Now, you had been cleared to already go into the jail and do some volunteer work, but you had a pretty drastic change in your life, didn't you?
Yes. In August of 2015, she did a home invasion with a firearm.
And this is your daughter, correct?
Yes. With 4 other kids.
Nobody was hurt in that, but she was, made some bad choices, and she got caught up in the criminal justice system. And when you make bad choices, bad things happen.
Yes. Yes.
So this really kind of changed your outlook on you. What's it like being a mother that has a 17-year-old daughter that's doing a 10-year sentence followed by 10 years of probation? What does that do to a mother?
We go through the same grieving process as a death. There's the denial, there's anger, there's sadness. Then we, at some point, just have to accept it. But we also get the isolation and the humiliation from the general public.
Now, you have, as part of this, been reaching out to the inmates, both the juveniles and the adult section, just trying to relay what it's like, for the decisions that they're making and how it impacts their family. Because so many of these people just say, well, it's my life, I can do what I want to with it. But it is much more than that.
Yes. Eventually I would like to start a mentoring program for the at-risk kids and the ones that are in jail and follow them outside of the jail. My main goal is to prevent them from doing a life-altering mistake like my daughter did, and to reduce the recidivism of those that are in the jail. I am a huge proponent of the restorative justice. They need to hear and understand what they do when they do crimes, how it affects themselves, their families, the victim, and the community. And if they hear me and get it, then I'm really making progress.
And plus, you're not one of the guards in the prison. You are somebody that's there because you want to be, not because you have to be, not that you're doing a job. And this is something that you just have in your heart because I'm sure your heart is breaking over your daughter. And if you can keep somebody from making another bad decision. Now, obviously, people have to be accountable because we make our decisions. And that's one of the messages you also teach. But golly, if they can just think a little bit beyond of their immediate situation and how it's going to impact the rest of their lives.
Yes. I hope to have a speaker come in soon that served 13 years in prison, and he has a great success story. So I hope to bring him in and have him speak to them so that they can see that there is hope, even if you have messed up. to know that they can do it and turn their lives around if they want to.
Absolutely. It's as I've always been told, you can never go backwards. You can't change what happened in the past, but you can change what's happening in the future.
Yes.
Because it's all decisions, and just to realize that it's more than just now, because we talked about it earlier. You know, when your daughter gets out, you know, she's going to have a record, and you try to get a job, and you try to get in certain professions, and it's people just don't think about that in many cases, especially the young kids.
Yes, and then there's probation and probation fees. And if you don't have a job or a good job to pay for all these fees, it just becomes a very difficult web to crawl out of and to get violation of probation.
Now, you actually have only been doing this in the jails, this counseling or the presentations, since about October, is that correct?
Since, yeah, about October.
Now, you've also, besides just Polk County, you have done it in other places as well. Where else have you done?
Orlando, and I've also been to a few schools.
And how does it differ with being in the prisons and being in the schools? Do you see a big difference in that?
The prisons, I feel, or the jails, they listen a little more, especially the ones that are in a little more serious trouble. You can see the difference of now they're really thinking about what's going to happen to them.
We had also talked earlier about everybody has cell phones. Everybody, takes selfies. They take photos. They laugh. They giggle. Oh, look how we looked, last year at Christmas or birthday.
Yes.
That is a new reality for someone who was in prison.
Yeah, there's no Kik, Instagram, Facebook, no social media whatsoever. There's no cell phones, and we all like our cell phones and social media, and there's none of that in the prison.
There's no bad hair days in prison either, is there?
You don't have to worry about your hair.
Yeah, don't have to worry about what you're going to wear. There's just so many things that, especially the young people, just don't, I think, comprehend or don't understand. They think it's going to be easy. Maybe they haven't, had to obey the laws, and they get in prison, and it's a lot. It's a real wake-up call for a lot of the kids.
Yeah, there's no hanging out with your friends, and basically a lot of your friends just kind of move on with their lives, and especially at this age where they're going to eventually go off to college or get married, have their own children, and then you just become a statistic sitting in prison.
Now, Kim, if someone wants to contact you to have them come speak at maybe your church or their group or their school, whatever, how can they get a hold of you?
They can reach me at an email of Lawrance, LAWRANCE, 57@AOL.com. And they can also reach me through the Polk County Jail through Linda Hooten.
Okay, now Linda is your boss, if you will. She oversees the volunteer effort.
Yes.
We've had Linda on the show before, so we certainly appreciate all that you're doing. We certainly feel for your situation, but it's a new normal, and it's so good that you're willing to help other people, other families that are going through or maybe getting ready to go through the same thing. Now, we had also mentioned, I think, also that you do go to a support group.
Yes.
As well.
It's Hope Seekers by Carol Crosby and her husband have a ministry where we meet, I think it's every third Monday of the month, 6:30 to 8, where the family of the incarcerated get together and we just discuss whatever's bothering us during that time, issues.
It always helps to be able to talk to somebody openly that's going through the same thing that you're going through or have been what you're going through, and what to kind of expect and how to guide you and help you get through those rough spots, because it is difficult.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you have a couple of mottos that you normally like to share. What are those?
Yes. Every child matters, every voice matters, and making each one count.
Kim, thank you so much for being on the show today. We appreciate it, and we wish you the best of luck.
All right. Thank you.
Crime Stoppers provides a way for local law enforcement to receive information on crimes while keeping the person providing that information anonymous. These efforts increase tips, which in turn solve more crimes and identify criminals in our community. Here's a look at some of our most recent cases.
Do you know who killed 21-year-old John Makeson DeRoche? Lakeland police are attempting to gain additional information on this unsolved homicide that occurred at 1315 West 14th Street on October 9, 2016, that was reported to police at 4:34 a.m. The victim is known as Little Haiti. DeRoche was found shot to death laying next to a vehicle that was parked outside of an apartment at this location. Lakeland police need your help in identifying these suspects of a grand theft that occurred within the city limits of Lakeland. On Monday, May 22nd, 2017, around 2:32 p.m., an unknown suspects pried open and broke into a window of a locked vehicle and removed a purse at Circle B Bar Reserve, located at 4399 Winter Lake Road in Lakeland. A witness saw a dark gray car pull away from the victim's vehicle and leave the area. The suspect's vehicle appears to be a 2012 Chrysler 200 Super S dark gray with dark tinted windows and chrome rims. The unknown female suspect pumping the gas has a large tattoo on her left calf. The Lakeland Police Department needs your help in identifying these suspects of a robbery that occurred within the city limits of Lakeland. On Sunday, May 7, 2017, around 2:30 p.m., this vehicle drove up to Paul's Westco convenience store located at 2100 Old Tampa Highway in Lakeland. A passenger exited the car, stole a case of beer. The vehicle appears to be white and an older model Honda Civic that has a black passenger door and fender. The Haines City Police Department is seeking the public's help in identifying the below-pictured suspects and suspect vehicle. The duo committed fraud on an elderly female by asking to look at her house, which was for sale. While inside the residence, they stole her purse and used stolen credit cards throughout Haines City. Lakeland police need your help in identifying this suspect of a theft that occurred within the city limits of Lakeland. Lakeland police need your help in identifying these suspects of a grand theft that occurred within the city limits of Lakeland. If you have any information on any of the cases you've just seen or any information on an unsolved crime, please contact Heartland Crime Stoppers and leave an anonymous tip. The toll-free tip line is 1-800-226-TIPS. That's 8477. You can also leave an anonymous web tip by going to www.heartlandcrimestoppers.com and click on the Give a Tip tab, or by going to www.p3tips.com. Don't forget, you can download our free P3 Tips app on your smart device. Whichever way you choose to leave a tip, you will remain 100% anonymous. If your tip results in an arrest, the recovery of stolen property, or the recovery of illegal drugs, you could be eligible for a cash reward of up to $3,000.
Welcome back to Crime Stoppers. I'm your host, Chip Brown. The porch light began with a single text. The leader of the Florida Department of Children and Families texted the president of the Florida Baptist Children's Home asking for help in meeting the desperate need for safe homes for child victims of domestic sex trafficking. Joining us in the studio is Michele Newsome with the porch light. Michele, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about your journey, how you ended up with your career and now you're at Porch Light.
I am. Well, I retired from the Lakeland Police Department. I'd actually been with them for over 24 years, or at 24 years. And during my tenure there, I worked child abuse, sex crimes, did that for almost 10 years. And when I left the Lakeland Police Department, I was actually in internal affairs. And so after I left the police department, I had gone back to school and was getting my master's degree in mental health counseling. And during that time, I was working with a licensed social worker, and he ran groups with sex offenders. So I was doing part of my internship with a social worker, also doing part of my internship at the Florida Baptist Children's Homes. And it was during that time they were talking about opening up a safe home that, as you mentioned earlier, Dr. Haig had received a text and saying, would you open up a safe home? And our motto at the children's homes is to help one more child. So obviously the answer was yes. So here I am, having retired from the police department. I was going to go into mental health counseling. I was interning there at the children's homes. I heard this and I said, oh, I would definitely be interested in doing that, if that came about. So when it came time to open up the safe home, they actually reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to come and be a part. And so my answer was yes. And so there I am. October 2014 is when we actually opened the safe home.
That's a lot of hard work. You had mentioned you spent 10 years doing sex investigations and crimes against children.
Yes.
And so many times people get burned out so quickly in that. You seem to have really caught fire with that area.
I did. Just a little bit of my personal story is I come from a history of child sexual abuse. So I've got that piece. And so I could really relate to victims and their families, especially when families would say things like, that would never happen to my child, or how could that happen because I'm always with them and I'm very protective, or my child would tell me if something like this happened. And based on my own experience, I can tell you that's not true. And so I was able to minister to the families, minister to the victims, and then I also found it challenging working with these offenders because, again, a lot of times you don't have that physical evidence. You don't have, you've got a child who can't communicate maybe exactly what happened. And so it was my job then to find out if, in fact, this did or did not happen and then help with that, putting that investigation together for the court system.
I'm just curious, as a former law enforcement officer, when you're counseling these people who are been probably, I guess, by this point, adjudicated guilty of some kind of sexual crime
Yes.
with a person, the games, do they still continue to play those games, or are they open with you?
It's depending on that individual person. We've had people that are very remorseful. I mean, during groups, they would just cry the entire time. You still have some that are coming in and have denial and they're wanting to place blame elsewhere. And, they too generally come from a past of trauma or something that has led, not that that's an excuse because we're all responsible for the decisions that we make, but it helps you more to be more a little sympathetic or empathetic to that situation. But again, it being a lot of it a psychoeducational piece that we're able to teach and train and speak with them and speak truth to them.
Now, one of the things, obviously, that the goal is for the victims of sexual trafficking, the child victims. Of course, people think, well, this is Polk County. We don't have sex trafficking here in Polk County. They're a little bit wrong.
They are a little bit wrong. It is in our own backyard, unfortunately. A lot of people have seen that movie Taken, and they believe that this is a global problem. And statistically, there's like 27 million, 20.9 million. There's all kind of numbers, and at best, those are guesstimates because victims are not lining up to be counted. And so we don't even know who some of these victims or survivors are who have been trafficked. But domestically, here in the United States, it has occurred. Human trafficking has taken place in all 50 states. So Florida actually is number 3 for having the most phone calls made to that human trafficking hotline. And Polk County is number 5 out of 67 counties in the state of Florida as having the most identified child victims of trafficking.
I know just there was a thing in the paper recently about 39 people were arrested for
Yes.
trying to have sex with minors, through reverse
Yes.
stings. And
Yes.
this is not the first time this sting has happened in Polk County.
No.
This is, I don't know, the 9th, 10th, 15th, I
Yes.
don't know. But
Yes. I've had the privilege of going out with Sheriff Grady Judd and the Sheriff's Department and some of these agencies that are doing these reverse stings, and actually get to be witness to these arrests and these men that are coming in to purchase sex, or even, it might be these girls who are putting and posting ads online. But again, they come in with there's so much trauma, and again, there's psychological manipulation involved in trafficking. A lot of times you see pictures of bondage and that sort of thing, and yes, that happens. But predominantly, it's psychological manipulation, where through force, fraud, and coercion, they're manipulating these vulnerable people, and they're exploiting them for the purpose of financial gain or something of value.
well, how do these people get involved in the sexual trafficking? I mean, how do they recruit girls or get them involved in the trade?
Well, again, if you watch TV, it all looks like the kidnapping and all of that kind of stuff. And yes, that does happen, but predominantly it's someone who has befriended you. For teen girls, and understand boys are trafficked as well, but again, at the Porch Light, we actually work with teen girls ages 12 to 17. And a lot of these girls that come to us have been trafficked by, they meet these older boys or these older men. And these men come in and groom them by buying them nice things, taking them to get their hair done, taking them to get their nails done, and they take them to eat, and they buy them and just, woo them. And then the next thing you know, they want something in return. And then that child or that girl feels like it because he has said, I love you. And obviously it's a distorted definition of what love is.
Certainly.
But he says, I love you, and that's my first boyfriend, and I think I love him, and he's done all of these nice things, so I will do this for him. Well, and he says, you only have to do this one time, and so then she does it the one time, and maybe he takes pictures, and then he threatens, and then he blackmails. I'm going to put these pictures of, you having sex with this person on social media, or I'm going to share it with your family, or I'm going to tell your pastor. And so now they feel like they're trapped and they don't have a way to get out. We also have had children in our homes whose parents actually have trafficked their own kids because maybe there's a drug addiction, and so they're exchanging that child for drugs. And, I actually spoke to one of the local schools here and did a presentation on human trafficking and gave that example. And one of the girls came up to me afterwards, and she was 14, 15 years old maybe, and she said, my mom gave me away. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she says, my mom gave me away for drugs. And she said from ages 8 to 12, that mom sold her in exchange for drugs to support her addiction. And then even grandparents are trafficking their grandchildren because they're on a fixed income. So let me sell my grandchild for sex in exchange for this money. Now I can pay my rent. And so adults traffic children, adults traffic adults too, because adults are trafficked as well. But you have children who traffic children. We have a survivor mentor that actually works with us, and she was 8 when she was recruited by a 10-year-old.
Oh my goodness.
So children are trafficking children as well.
Yeah. And that's, again, stuff that you just don't think about here in Polk County, that happening here in our community. But it's very real.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. I even share one of the stories. I speak a lot at Southeastern University, and several years ago there was an arrest right there in that Crystal Grove area, Michael Gallen. And he's now in federal prison, but he was running a show. He had these girls coming to his home with the pretense of being a dance group, and they were coming, and he literally was transporting them from location to location for these VIP parties where they were dancing and much, much more.
Now, are there any signs that a general person maybe could pick up on if they see something like this that they should be aware of, that they can keep their eyes open for?
Right. Well, one of the things that we talked about is, that grooming process where they're maybe buying these kids or giving things these expensive. I mean, if you have a 10-year-old, 12-year-old daughter and she comes home with a $500 purse, that should be a sign. where did that come from? Where did you get that? Especially if the family's not the one that purchased it or has the means to do so. So, you want to start asking questions. Tattooing, not to say everybody who has a tattoo is a victim of trafficking, but, these traffickers will tattoo these children or tattoo these people by putting their names on them. We actually at the Porch Light had one of our girls that had the name of her pimp was tattooed on the forearm, and because she is a commodity, she is property, I own you. So if they're coming home with this tattoo, if they have this older boyfriend that they're real secretive about and they're not talking about that boyfriend, when they're maybe they begin to listen to maybe like really sexualized music, maybe they start talking sexually, those are some things that you might look at. So we actually have, and you can go to our website at theporchlight.org, and we have a whole list of things that you can look for. And as you're out in the community, if you recognize something, then you can call law enforcement, or you can call that hotline that I referenced earlier. So again, to report, what you're seeing, because it's just parents needing to know, especially the internet, and we've talked about internet, these reverse stings, almost half of these kids and people are recruited online. So parents need to know their children's passwords. They need to know who they're talking to. They need to know who their friends are. They need to be involved in their children's lives. And because, again, they're recruiting online. So
yeah, these predators really seem to want to use any means they can, social media, and just get that one or two people. And
it's so easy, unfortunately, and again, I'm working with children through the Porch Light, but you talk about vulnerabilities, low self-esteem. So if I approach you as a young girl and tell you, oh, you're so pretty, you should be a model, and you're so much smarter than all your other friends, already, I want to hear that. It makes me feel good. So they tend, these people that prey on vulnerabilities, that's what they're looking at, is to fill a need that's maybe it's not being met at home, it's missing. So that, we talked a little bit about that sexual abuse. There's a statistic out there, 80 to 90% of children or people that get involved in sex trafficking have been abused prior to being trafficked. 80 to 90%. So that's huge. So that's a vulnerability factor. And as, again, these traffickers build relationships with them, they begin to open up and tell them things. If things aren't going well at home, or this is what's happening at home. And again, they're just luring them in. Unfortunately, the foster care system, again, they're looking for that sense of belonging. When I was at the police department, I also worked in the gang unit. And that was one of the things with that. What do they want? They want a sense of belonging. They want a sense of family. They want to be part of that group. They even call these traffickers daddy, because a lot of times there's a missing father figure in this home. So again, they're bringing something to meet a need for that person that's making them draw to them. And then they attach emotionally, and then there comes that psychological manipulation and how they're getting them to do what they want them to do. And a lot of people ask, why don't they leave? And that's because of that psychological manipulation and those threats.
They feel they have no place else to go.
No place to go. And, again, lack of education is, again, a vulnerability factor. So if I don't know what my options are, and even as we talk about children, and I do a whole spiel on brain development and trauma, but their brains aren't even fully developed. So how do they, come to make those decisions? And they're thinking on that emotional side of the brain instead of that executive portion of the brain, where they're that higher level of thinking. So they do feel trapped and don't feel like there's a way out.
Well, Michele, thank you so much for sharing. I know you've got a ton more information. Certainly people can contact you if they need you to come speak or learn more about it.
Absolutely.
So we thank you for coming today, and we look forward to hearing some success stories.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For more information on the Porch Light, you can look them up on the web at www.theporchlight.org. That's going to do it for this edition of Crime Stoppers. Keep in mind, Heartland Crime Stoppers is an organization that helps law enforcement solve crime through anonymous tips and monetary rewards. It encourages a cooperative partnership between law enforcement, the media, and the community to ensure security and enhance our quality of life here in Polk County. For more information, you can check us out on the web at heartlandcrimestoppers.com or follow us on Facebook at Heartland Crime Stoppers Florida. Until next time, keep in mind, it's a crime, and you can help make sure that they don't get away with it.